Oh, well, hey, stranger, who the heck are you?
They call me the Wanderer. I've been wandering these plains for some time. You have any good whiskey in these parts? I'd be happy to trade you a story for a shot.
What kind of story you got, partner?
It's got winning, it's got losing, it's got good guys, it's got bad guys, it's got underdogs, it's got cheaters, and the good guy and the bad guy, they meet in the middle at the end.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good story to me. I reckon I would trade some whiskey for that. So how's it start?
The story is about 1998 U.S. Nationals, Magic the Gathering. But first you had to get there. Most people started their quest at regionals. That's a series of local tournaments that will qualify the top 8 participants into nationals.
So prep for regionals was kind of knew the decks or whatever. And then I don't know if it was like I just didn't love any deck or like card availability. So my homie, who's, you know, is still my boy these days, he lives very close to me, Dave Mignani, he had a Merfolk deck, and he was just like, I actually think this deck is good in the in the meta. And I was just like, all right. And like I wasn't like, I guess I didn't take the event super seriously. So I was just like kind of like, all right, like I trust him. He was like my Magic mentor, to be honest. Like he was like the first person to take me under his wing and show me like how to play good Magic. So I kind of just always trusted him, and he was just like, this deck's good in the meta, and I was like, all right, I'll play it. And that's just kind of how it happened. So yeah, for regionals, I mean, from my initial days of Magic, like Merfolk's kind of always been like a little pet deck of mine. I don't know why. Like I just like the idea of like having a lord and having like a tribe.
He had a card in his deck, Merfolk Seer. It's a 2 colorless and a blue 2/2. And when it dies, you can pay some amount of mana. I think a blue and a colorless to draw a card. Just even for that time, that was an extremely poor card. And it was in the deck because the Merfolk Seer, he's second in command. It was like Matt's fun Merfolk deck.
And like the deck was actually like, it was actually good. You know, like it had Curse Scroll in it, it had Waterspout Djinn, it had, you know, Lord. Like the deck was not bad, or else I wouldn't have played it. And then, I mean, there was no like internet back then. Like we all kind of knew Cav, Frost Bloom was like kind of like, you know, like the best combo deck to play, but there was tons of other decks that people played. And then I don't know if my matchups were good or what it was, but like I lost round 2, I remember, to Suicide Black. I remember that vividly, and I was kind of like, oh, that sucks. Like my tournament's kind of over. And I just ran it up to 7-1, and then, you know, the standings were pretty clear. I shouldn't say that because my buddy Brock drew himself out, only 7-1-1 to miss. So, but like my breakers were good enough that I was just like, well, if I draw, I'm pretty much in. So yeah.
So you're telling me that he won even though he had bad cards in his deck? Second in command.
And I felt like regionals was a chance for me to reassert myself. So I spent a lot of time researching what the popular standard decks were. I ended up building this Living Death deck, which was designed to just have too many things that needed to be countered. Like I'm going to get like a Morrow out on turn 3, and well, you better counter that because otherwise it's just going to quickly win the game. And then I would intuition for more powerful creatures because the deck was just filled with powerful creatures and lobotomies and things you just had to counter. And I just waited till it was obvious you were out of counters, and they would play Living Death and the game would essentially be over. Unfortunately, there was a couple people at regionals who were playing Bloom Drain. And, you know, aside from a couple lobotomies in the sideboard, I really didn't. It was just a horrible matchup for me, and I happened to get paired up against like every single Bloom Drain person in the tournament, and I didn't make top 8. My 3 friends playing the same deck as me finished 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in Northeast Regionals. So I felt vindicated that it was the right deck to play. And I felt so much confidence in the deck and myself after Regionals that I felt it was worth driving to Nationals and trying to grind in, as challenging as grinding in is.
You could also qualify by just being one of the best around. All the highest ranked DCI players were invited, and everybody else had to qualify through either regionals or the meat grinders.
First day of Nationals is not actually Nationals, right? It's the Meat Grinders, which was interesting because there was a blue-green Oath deck that kind of became the breakout deck. Like nobody else showed up with Oath. Like we had this green-white Oath deck that we're ready to go. A little disappointing to see a blue-green Oath deck crush in the Grinders, but we felt like ours was better. We felt like we were advantaged in the heads-up matchup, and kind of didn't let that throw us.
Part of the problem with the Grinders, as you may recall, was your record needed to be almost flawless to qualify. Like, I think like 2 losses, for example, maybe it was even single elimination. I can't remember, but it was it was very, very hard to make it through a meat grinder, which is probably why it was called a meat grinder, besides the fact there were just so many people trying to qualify for nationals there. I don't think I lost a game. Like I just sailed through and like never felt particularly challenged as I qualified for nationals on the spot. So I really felt like, oh yeah, my confidence was vindicated here. And I didn't see other people playing decks like mine, especially with the changes I'd made since regionals. And I was also relieved to see that there weren't people playing Bloom Drain, because I still wasn't particularly prepared for that matchup. But there's all sorts of aggressive decks. There was the mono green deck. There was all sorts of permission-based decks, and all of those matchups were fine.
Arriving in Columbus, I didn't yet have a firm idea of what I wanted to play. So Seth Byrne and I actually were going to the same college. We went to Claremont McKenna College, so that's how I knew Seth pretty well. And the evening of the meat grinders, the day before Nationals tournament started, Seth tells me about this deck.
So this deck was originally, I was just testing it out as a fun deck. The idea was to play 12 land destruction spells plus 4 wastelands. So I had, I think it was 4, either was it Winter's Grasp? Let's double check. It was Winter's Grasp, 4 Winter's Grasp, 4 Creeping Mold, 4 Desert Twister, 4 Vineyards, 4 Wastelands, because you're expecting a lot of white weenie and red aggro. And the only way they could use the Vineyard mana was via Cursed Scroll, and a lot of their spells cost white and then double white, such like that, and red needed double red to Fire Blast, 2 mountains. So if you kept them low on lands, it was very hard for them to function, which is ironic when you think of those decks as cheap mana, cheap creatures, whatever else, but they were very vulnerable to land destruction. So that was the original idea, and the deck did its job against those decks, and then I started taking against other decks, and Scragnoth gave me game against blue, the land destruction, and Cham Instruction gave you game against Cadaverous Bloom, so long as they weren't cheating. So it was, the deck had enough good matchups. I decided that it was what I was going to bring to U.S. Nationals. And it ended up doing very well in the meat grinders. 2 or 3 people qualified through those tournaments with it. And yet, it was not the deck that was the story of the meat grinders, apparently. It was Oath of Druids. Like, you may or may not know this, but Oath of Druids, like, quintupled in price. Like, it went from being a reasonably affordable rare to a chase rare to do the meat grinders. So everyone knew about Oath heading into the tournament, and no one cared about the stupid green deck. No metagame against it, not a concern, not a thought.
The way that the deck got its moniker is people were overheard during the tournament saying, yeah, I just lost to that stupid green deck.
So now that all the players are qualified, we get to start day 1 in Nationals.
Day 1 of Nationals was limited, and my tournament could not have started worse. I was at a 7-player pod, which should mean 1 and 2 is the worst you can go, right? You lose the first 2, you're going to get a bye in the last round. I managed to go 0-2 and 1. I didn't even get the pity win because I picked up a draw in the second round and then got rounded away from the bye. So I had a worse record than should have been possible and essentially torpedoed my entire tournament. It turns out the good thing about going 0-2-1 in the first pod at Nationals is you get to draft at the table with all the losers. I demolished the second table. I drafted like first pick Fireslinger, second pick Winds of Wrath, third pick Fireslinger, fourth pick Fireslinger. Like, Fireslinger's literally the best comment in my opinion, at least on the short list. And I got 3 of them. That deck was ridiculous. So yeah, 3-0 that. I'm back up above 500 going to constructed, but whatever. I have to run the whole table to really have a shot at top 8, unfortunately.
So for draft, it really did go about it as well as it could according to plan. I actually drafted red, white, in both drafts. I believe I finished the first day with a record of either 5-1-1 or sorry, I think it was 6 rounds each. So it would have been 4-1-1 or 5-0-1.
Limited, I'll never forget this. I had a turn 3 kill on the play in limited, so I've never been able to replicate that since, so I'll never forget that. So it was Mirage Visit, was it? No, Tempest Stronghold Exodus. Said the wrong set. So I went Sky Shroud Ranger, which lets you play another additional land and play if you tap it, into Adathi Marauder, I think it was called, 3/1 Shadow, into land, an additional land, attack with my Marauder, Hatred, through a Grizzly Bear blocker because it had Shadow, against Mark Lapine. I'll never forget it. I don't think I'll ever have a turn 3 limited kill again, but at least I got one there. So, I mean, I knew my deck was good, so I 3-0'd the first draft with black-green, and my pod was stacked. I got to the table, and I was petrified. It was Mark Lapine, Darwin Castle was there. I think Bob Maher was in the pod, if I'm not mistaken. It was at least like 4 names I recognized from top-level play, so this was my first big tournament. I was just like, well, I can't possibly. And then I won the table, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I got lucky. I had a good deck. And then draft 2, I thought I had a really good deck, and I lost the mic long. Forget if it was for 6-0 or for either in the finals or the semifinals. And then I went 5-1 in limited. I do remember that, but I don't remember much about my second deck, but I do remember the Hatred kill, that's for sure.
My first draft pod, Mike Long was in my draft pod. I believe we were in game 3. And he was one of the things in my deck, the last few cards that I had to put in my deck, where there was a 1/1 elf that tapped to give a flyer -1/-1. It was a garbage card, but I was a little short, and people were playing like the cheap white flyers, and the blue deck was playing like there was a 3/1 that couldn't block, block flyers, stuff like that. It had targets. Really not very strong cards, but they were filler, and they were playable in this matchup. We get to a point where he has a killer whale on the table, and I have like 3 of these elves in play. I had drawn all 3 of them. And so we're kind of at a stalemate, and in a lot of situations, you just fly over with a killer whale. The killer whale was a 3/5 that you could pay a blue mana to give it flying. But I've got 3 of these little elves in play. They're just going to make it a 1/3, and I'm going to take a point of damage, and he's going to lose the services of this 3/5 blocker that's holding off a bunch of like little dorks in the ground. So we're kind of at this weird impasse. He's attacking with some other creatures in such a way where if he has a giant growth effect, I'm in a lot of trouble. And he knows that I can't effectively double block without, if he has a growth effect. I can't remember what the growth effect for Tempest block was, or for that block was, but he knows it, and he's pushing that advantage. He's attacking into basically effectively a 3/3 into a pair of 2/2s, which is not a great attack. But if you think that your opponent thinks that you have a growth effect, it's fine. I'm just gonna take 3. A couple turns later, I make a block where the play would be clearly to play a growth effect, and he doesn't. And I just make the decision at that point. I make the read. He doesn't have it. I don't have to worry about it. I can stop playing around that and get my defense back. Which leads up to this situation where I have a Root Walla and some of those elves. I think I have 2 of those elves at this point. And he attacked with the killer whale. And I at this point, I think his read was that I think he felt that I still was playing scared of a giant growth effect. He didn't know that I no longer was. And so I double blocked with a Root Walla, which is a 2/2 that can activate to become a 4/4, and a 1/1 elf. And a 4/4 and a 1/1 is going to kill his 3/5, and he's going to kill an elf. And it's a bad trade, and probably turns the game in my favor significantly. We're at this weird stalemate where we're basically playing off the top, but all of a sudden, if he loses that 3/5, his leverage just goes away. But I don't think he thought I was going to make that block. But I made the block. And bear in mind, he's got plenty of time after declaring attackers, doing all these things, to do anything he wants to do. I block. I activate my root walla to make a 4/4. And Mike called the judge. And the judge comes over, and Mike explains to the judge that I had blocked his killer whale before he had an opportunity to activate it and give it flying. Basically, he had attacked, I'd quickly thrown my guys in front of him, which wasn't true. And also doesn't make any sense. Like, if he's going to attack with a flying killer whale, he can give it flying before the attack phase and then attack with it. There isn't a world in which that pattern of play is a normal thing for two people just playing a game of Magic. And I don't know how much I contested his version of the events, because I was playing my friend, and I was playing a pro, and I was this guy that had never played in a premier event before. And the judge was, random volunteer, 10 years later, when I had, a dozen Pro Tours under my belt, this story ends differently. But at the time, I got, the Mike Long social engineering experiment, kind of played to a T. And he was allowed to fly right over my guys. I gave it -1, as a token resistance. And then his killer whale ended up locking up the ground game. And he got rid of my elves and got some flyers a few turns later and killed me.
I don't recall much about that draft format, really. It was Tempest Block, and I don't know when each set came out, but I had, one Pro Tour New York, which I think was the final Pro Tour of that season, which was Tempest Block Draft, and maybe they added the second set, or the third set, to it. I had a tremendous record in that draft format, because I think I 6-0 Nationals and 6-0 Worlds, and then did well at the first, or top 8, maybe the first Pro Tour of the next season, which was draft with all 3 of the sets. But I don't remember about what was good strategy or really that much in the way of details about it, unfortunately.
So then they started day 2 of Nationals. But first, they got to stay up all night picking out their decks.
Seth was leading a charge then with the Spike deck. It was a very cool deck. It was a real nightmare for a lot of the creature decks. Red was going to really, really have trouble with it. With those spike feeders they could gain all this life from. They had these spikes they could just fog every turn and just sit there fogging away. You're sitting there just watching them fog while you're dying. What they did, it was one of the things that sharpened my decision to play Bloom Drain. I do want to give a tip of the cap to Seth on that. He was the deck designer and the innovator that came up with that. And then my teammate Bryce was the most successful player of the deck.
Exodus came out. That was the last set before Nationals, and it had a lot of powerful cards in it. It had a lot of interesting cards in it. And the one that we latched onto, and this was really Eric who saw it first, was Oath of Druids. So Oath of Druids would say if your opponent has more creatures than you, you get to flip cards off the top of your library until you hit a creature, put it into play. Just super powerful effect, could get giant creatures into play for free. And it's a 2-mana enchantment, super cheap card. So we zeroed in on that card, and we spent a lot of time trying to break it, trying to figure out, okay, how do you actually win with this card? The trick to Oath of Druids is if your opponent understands what's going on, they won't play any creatures, right? It's easy to win with an Oath deck if your opponent just kind of blindly plays creatures out. So okay, fine. We've got, the biggest creature we could come up with was Archangel. This is the 90s. The creatures are not exactly amazing. So 5/5 vigilance flying, like a Sarah Angel with +1/+1. I was as good as it got. You couldn't really do much better than that. So that was our creature. We would flip that out 5/5. It could play defense, it could play offense, right? It can block, it can attack. If you're going to play some random Doric on the first couple of turns of the game, I'm going to get this out. I'm going to kill you very quickly. Okay, smart players would just not play creatures against us. So we had to build our deck such that we could handle that situation, right? We're both staring at each other. How are we going to win? And that's where Scroll Rack came into play. And then the card Mulch has never been good in any format in the history of time, not limited, not anything except in exactly this deck. It was so good if we're just staring at each other. And I've got a Scroll Rack, so Scroll Rack lets me look at the top of my library, put cards back. Essentially, you could set up the top of your library with a bunch of lands, mulch into those lands, and now suddenly my hand is 4 cards bigger. They're sort of just lands, except I have a Scroll Rack, so I then get to go turn them into whatever I want to turn them into. Scroll Rack also let you futz with the top of your deck, and when you're oathing, you can just get rid of the cards you don't want. Scroll Rack also lets you put the Archangel back in the deck if you accidentally drew it. Anyway, yeah, this deck was great.
Matt got there. I think I probably went 4-2 in the draft. I don't remember doing terrible, but I knew I pretty much would have to go 6-0, the next day or whatever. And Matt had gone 5-1. And I mean, he was just, I'm going to play my Merfolk deck. That night, he said. And I'm like, Matt, we have a good deck here. It's pretty easy to play. We worked on it. And he wanted to play it. And I'm like, I finally convinced him. He's like, well, fine. If we can get the cards, I'll play it. So we got in the deck together. And, he played it. And then the rest of that is history. But that's kind of how he put no effort into that deck. 0 effort.
Self-admittedly, I was never a good constructed player. Still not a good constructed player. So I always kind of had people in my life that I was just like, hey, if you tell me something, I'm going to do it. Like with regionals with my buddy Dave. Nationals was Kyle Rose. Kyle Rose he lives in Richmond, still does to this day. He lived in the, Mike and Peter and those guys, they lived, a little further north in Charlottesville, whatever. All Virginia guys, so they all knew each other. So Kyle was kind of like the one that's like, he tells me something's good, I'm like, all right, I'm in, and I just listen to him. And with my testing with him, we had played a bunch of different decks. I don't necessarily know anything was 100% settled. We knew this was a deck that we thought was good. And then I remember us kind of debating sideboard slots of, when we decided on the deck, we were, had a few slots that were, up for grabs. And I remember us talking in the hotel room about how do we want to configure the sideboard. So that's kind of how the deck choice went down. And I mean, looking back, I don't think it was the best deck or anything, but I don't know. In my career, I seem to have a lot of success with aggressive one color decks, be it Merfolk from regionals, this nationals. I played Stompy at Worlds. So most of my constructed success has come with one color aggro, just, pound it, don't let them do what they're trying to do style decks. So I was down for it. So
there was a deck that we had built prior to going to built prior to going to nationals. It was a combo deck with Pandemonium and Dreadnought, and it was amazing. And I didn't play test it at all. And then so after I went 5-1 on day one, I literally didn't know we didn't have to submit our deck list for until the day, the day of the tournament for standard. And so, with my inexperience of this deck that all my friends were telling me, this deck is amazing, right? And it had Mana Vault and, Lotus, Petal and, Ancient Tomb and City of Traders and all these cards that are banned and in the vintage format. And I understand, I played Type 1 and I would play with all the Moxes and all. I played a deck that would lay all of its Moxes out and Mana Vaults and recall it back and play. I understand how fast mana works and stuff. So, but for me, I just got really, I don't know, I was just younger, so I just, you get stuck on one like thing, and it's like I was like much more closed-minded than I am now. And I think what it was I literally was like, I have so much experience with mono red that I know I can 4-2 with it 100% of the time, and I'm gonna do that because that's all I care about is making top 8. And then when you see what happens, I make top 8, and then, well, I didn't really take into consideration getting 8th or 5th or whatever.
And I've been playing the Forbidian deck mostly just because it was a fun deck, and I didn't really think it was quite good enough, but it wasn't. It wasn't bad. It was actually pretty good against the mono white decks. That was, I think, its strongest matchup. Like, there was like a blue knight that like flanking that killed another knight when it came into play. And even though like my deck had like bad creatures, like 1/3s and 2/2s could kind of line up kind of well. And I didn't really think of Nationals as that serious of a tournament. So I was just like, sure, I'm going to play this Forbidian deck because it's fun. And I did, I 6-0'd the draft, I think, and I think I went like 3-2-1 or 3-1-2 or something in constructed. So, it's a memorable deck. It was a fun deck, but I'm not going to say it was the best deck.
It turned out a lot more like regionals than I would have liked. I can't remember whether I finished 9th or 10th, but basically, for the most part, I just sailed through. Like, I'd play against mono green, and we'd both be playing a bunch of big creatures, but they could at best use like a desert twister to kill a big creature of mine, where I had access to all the colors and could, among things, eventually living death, and there's just nothing they could do about it. So every game was just a matter of time. Like, they can stall by putting up walls or gaining health or whatever, but they couldn't put serious pressure on me because all the different things my deck could do, and the outcome was always inevitable. Among things, it was hard for them to deal with like Trade Wind Riders, especially when I could bring them back, and there's just so many tools I had for that matchup. So that felt like a buy every time I played mono green. And like a Forbidian deck was tougher because they could counter key things, but I had actually designed this deck back in the day to specifically beat permission-based decks. So I was used to playing that matchup, and I could also sideboard in lobotomies if I want to make it even harder for them. And again, the deck was pretty much designed to beat decks like Sly. So I had like 8 walls, and I had spike feeders, and I could bring in more of that type of thing, and I could bring them back from the discard pile, and I could load them into the graveyard. Like, so that was also felt like a very easy matchup. Not as easy as mono green. Mono green was easily the easiest matchup, but sort of the standard decks, white weenie, whatever, like the things that generally did well in the tournament were all like I felt playing into my hands. So most of my matches were easy, with 2 exceptions. There, as far as I know, exactly 2 people in the entire tournament who were playing Bloom Drain. Mike Long and his buddy Peter Lair. Those were the only 2 people in the entire tournament playing it. And that's partly because while the deck had done reasonably well at regionals, the metagame had evolved past it. Like, there were so many decks that just beat it that people stopped playing it. But Mike Long intelligently realized that after it evolved out of the metagame, people stopped accounting for it with their deck builds and with their sideboards. So suddenly it went from being impossible to be successful with it to being a great choice. So like Mike and Peter were suddenly playing a deck that was a great matchup against like everything, because everyone assumed no one would play it. And while it is a deck that's easy to sideboard against, you actually have to do it. You actually have to have the cards in your sideboard to beat. And they just gambled that wouldn't be the case. And even if you do have sideboard cards for it, you're not guaranteed to beat it. Like and Mike Long in particular is very good at playing combo. And if you're obviously, I don't know how often Mike cheated or when he cheated, but obviously if you're willing to cheat, combo decks become especially powerful.
Yeah, I had to run the table and construct it, and I came close. I went 5-1. So the Oath deck was every bit as good as we thought it was. Nobody went 6-0. They did some tiebreakers and decided I had actually won the constructed day. So they gave me a shout out at the award ceremony. And yeah, 5-1 got me into the top 16. I think I was 12, something like that. So if I had gone 4-2 and limited instead of 3-2-1, I actually would have been live for top 8 down the stretch. But I don't know. Yeah, these things happen.
I had to play Pete Lyer. That was bittersweet. I beat Pete. It was really, really early in the event. I could still lose out. I was maybe 9-0 at the time, or 10-0. For sure, like maybe like 9-0 or something like that. For sure, I could still lose like 3 matches, lose out, and not make top 8. So that was definitely a bummer. Let's see. I played David Price in the Swiss. David really hated me. That guy really, really hated me. I could tell. He would just get this look of pain, just worried, pained look on his face as I'm beating him down. But I'm playing against him, just smashing him and smashing him. I remember the time I was thinking about tutoring for a chill against Dave Price, and I was like, wait a second, I can just kill him next turn instead. That was my favorite Dave Price story from this particular tournament.
I think it was the penultimate round, I want to say. I played against Matt Place, who was like also a legend, who went on to like create games or whatever. So I played him, and I was, a little intimidated. So he was playing like basically kind of like mono blue Ophidian type stuff. So I beat him, and I was just kind of like, woof. And then for my winning in, most people won't know this player, but Jason Monge, who was a Madison pro at the time, he was basically playing my same deck, but with blue for Slate of Hand in the sideboard, I believe. So he could like slate a priest, a priest or like his shadow creatures to red and black to other colors to kind of, but essentially the same deck. And then I think I remember it being pretty tight, and once I beat him, it was a side of relief, and it was a little honestly was just kind of, is this real? Am I dreaming? Like, did I just make top 8 of like my first like major tournament? Like it was kind of surreal for sure.
So the real meat and potatoes of this story comes in right now, right here at round 12 of Standard.
So my last round is playing against Michael Long. He's playing the Cadaver's Bloom deck.
The last round, the debacle. So do you want to get to that? How do you want to handle that?
And it's going to be a pretty tough matchup for my deck as well. I've got maybe a little bit of enchantment removal, some instant speed enchantment removal. So if he gets down to Cadaver's Bloom and wants to try and start going off by playing all the other spells, that gives him extra mana, like Squandered Resources and others, so I can disrupt him a little bit. But my ability to do that is going to be somewhat limited. It's my only way to really try and stop him from pulling off any combos is some instant speed enchantment removal. Basically, what ends up happening is I believe a judge comes up and says something. Don't remember at this point what, but they basically take Mike Long's deck. Yoink. And then sometime later they come back and they just tell me that I've been awarded a match win. And I don't think I really know what the hell just happened. I don't really know the circumstances. I don't know what caused it immediately. And then it was Seth who came to me later and tells me that he had seen a Cadaver's Bloom, I think maybe tucked under Mike's leg or in his lap. Maybe it wasn't tucked under. I don't really, at this point, I don't even remember what Seth told me.
So just so you can picture this, table 1, table 2, I think all the way to like table 4, table 6, they're all next to the sidelines. The spectators can view those tables. Mike Long was, I believe, at table 1 when a guy by the name of Anthony Cantu, spotted the cadaver's bloom in the lap. This was a situation where there was lots of eyes on the game because the spectators could view it. It was a spectator who happened to see the situation and call the judge. It's visible. Like, I saw it with my own eyes. He was sitting, it was not technically on the lap, although historically it is known as the bloom in the lap, but it was the bloom on the chair.
My buddy Chad and I, we actually slept underneath the tables the day before when they were setting up because we were 15 and we had no money for a hotel, and they wouldn't let us sleep in the food court anymore. So there's this huge long hallway, and inside one of those little side rooms is where they set up nationals. And all they did was they put this railing up, just a little railing, maybe this thick, and you could just walk right up to it. So in the feature match was so if you were facing there, it was the far right, and then there were rows and rows going back. So we watched pretty much every round over there. I mean, I was maybe 5 feet away from him at most, if even that. There was a huge group of people. You could just see right in, you could see what's in his hand. I don't remember what point in the match it happened, but he did his usual where he stands up on his chair like this, and he's up here, and he's shuffling his cards in between his lap, whatever. And at that point, you could see down there was something under his legs, but like he sits tight, but his legs are wide open. So something was on the chair. You couldn't tell what it was. You just got a glimmer of it, but he's moving around so fast. He sits back down, he climbs back up. 2 or 3 times he did that. Finally on the third, it was either the second or third when the group was like, there's something on that chair. There's something on that chair. Don't know what it is. So on the third one, somebody finds like, we got to call a judge. We get the judge to come over, and he gets up, and there's the cadaver's bloom sitting on the chair. So the judges confer. I don't know how much time it took, but it was maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. They come over and they give him a match loss, which does nothing because he's already qualified for the top 8 at 11-0. So we thought for sure it would have been a disqualification based off of history. It's such a strange thing. Like, he was playing the mono green wildebeest deck. Like, he's got land destruction, something, but he has no interaction really to stop the combo once it's going off. So that was the whole thing. It was so weird. Don't know the intent. Call the judge, and there's a card there.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
Nobody knows how it got there. Nobody knows. If it's there, it had to get there somehow.
We were behind the rail when his card like showed up in his lap, so to speak. And I remember from that basically what everyone else remembers, which was Mike's look of pure astonishment that that card was there. It was really strange because the only possible, like as I remember it, the only possible way that happens the way it does is if he's crouching in his chair. It's almost like that thing almost like set him up for failure in the sense that because of what he was allegedly doing. I don't even know if he gets caught if he's just sitting on his ass, if that makes sense.
So I was playing and doing well. They had a feature match area set up. So when my match ended, I was kind of surprised. Like, I think I've got the memory right. The feature match was still going for some reason. And it's because there was this long delay, right? There was this pause. And so I'm sort of wandering over to the feature match area trying to figure out what's going on, and people are buzzing about it. And yeah, Mike Long had a cadaverous bloom, I think, what was it, under his chair on the ground, or in his lap was the way it was heard. And the judges had found this, the judges had stopped the match. And so yeah, there's this buzz that, Long's been caught. Long's finally been caught. Mike Long certainly had a reputation as a cheater. I mean, this was something that you had to look out for. It was kind of the wild, wild west of Magic, and there were people that you kind of knew you had to watch pretty close, that they were going to try to get away with something, if they let you get away with something. And Mike Long was the most notorious of these people. Mike Long also had a charisma about him, where like he was trying to get edges. He had like a wrestling background, and he would just do all kinds of weird stuff, like sit perched up on his chair. Like, is he trying to intimidate you? Is he trying to see your hand because he's up higher than he should be because he's perched on his chair weird? Like, there were a lot of people who were worried about Mike from a lot of different angles, and nobody trusted the judges to catch people. And punish people when they did catch them. Like there's a little bit of energy from Wizards where it seemed like, they liked a bit of a professional wrestling vibe. Like they weren't unhappy if there were villains in the story, and they thought that, if we've got good guys and bad guys, that's going to make the product more compelling. When more people are going to tune in to watch if you've got some bad guys in the narrative. So Wizards wasn't entirely trusted to drive the cheaters out of the game. A lot of us felt like, yeah, we have to look out and watch out for people. Anyway, so Mike is the most notorious of these people, and now it feels like he's been caught dead to rights. And so the buzz is, wow, he's not going to make top 8. He's going to get kicked out of the tournament. You get a little bit of like, who's going to make top 8 and Mike's spot. And so this feature match is just kind of paused while the judges are trying to figure out what they're going to do. And eventually, I guess, they decide they're not going to kick him out of the tournament. Right? So he gets to make top 8 anyway, and definitely a controversial decision.
I was definitely aware of the Mike Long incident. I mean, there was chatter, because he was at, I think he was undefeated in the tournament at that point. I'm almost sure he was, and I think that might have been a cause of maybe what happened, because to say you just steamroll the tournament is pretty cool. So I didn't know what happened at the I was playing because I think I remember being seated, or maybe I was watching, don't remember exactly, but there was definitely a lot of judges at the top table, and I remember being like, what's going on, so, and then after everyone kind of got the story, and there was a lot of chatter about it, and it was how wasn't he DQ'd? A lot of that, and it's these days if that happened, you are immediately gone. Even if you have it slipped out of my hand. I don't know what the excuse was, but pretty much no chance that would fly these days. Everyone was just there was a boom in the lap. That was kind of the phrase that was going out around the tournament center, and without knowing what happened. But obviously it's extremely shady, and you can take your guesses at what happened, but yeah, it was, and it would have been that he could have got DQ'd, and then he was going to be first seed almost automatically, so it's would you put that on the line to just go undefeated? But knowing Mike, I think he might would, because he was such a perfectionist, so to speak. So who knows? I've never heard that it was on the floor. That's at least better to me than under the thigh, because at least if it's on the floor, a card could have gotten shuffled and it just dropped on the floor, right? But if there's a card on the floor and you're I have an itch on my ankle, I'm gonna pick up so nothing absolves him of what happened, but like you said, it's a game of telephone. No one, unless the people at table 2 probably kind of knows exactly what happened, right? Obviously Mike did, but that's my take on it.
Whatever the consequences were, obviously didn't fit the crime. I think, obviously, as he made the finals.
I mean, Chris was leading a crusade. God, he wanted to be ejected from that tournament so badly, from the bottom of his little Chris Pikula heart. And so he was just charging around the event and just trying to get anybody to listen to him.
I do remember Chris, and especially David Price, being how do I describe it? Dave was militantly angry, just really, really did not. None of us really liked Mike, but David took it very personally. Chris was more of a crusader against cheating in general, and I think David was more, this guy Mike's is not, he shouldn't be around. He's just bad for business, bad for Magic. And David really, most of us at that point, Price knew that this was something special, and he thought Mike was ruining it, and he took it very personally. Chris, I don't felt like Chris ever took things personally. He certainly didn't like Mike. I don't want to intimate that, but it was more about general, you shouldn't cheat at this because because we owe it and it ruins it for everybody, and et cetera, et cetera. And David was always more personal towards Mike Long, I think.
Pikula was the one who spearheaded this whole thing and was like, because it used to be like, oh, can I pull a cheat? It's cool. Like, I'm cool. Hey. And it's like, it's not cool, bro. Like, so Pikula was the first like kind of high level player that like spoke out about this and was like, cheating's bullshit. Don't do it. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but whatever. So he kind of spearheaded that, and like it got some traction. And I think a lot of pro players, a lot of judges were like, hey, he's right. Like, this is like, we need to have the game on a level playing field and not rely exactly only on the player to catch their opponent. We need to do our due diligence, and judges need to watch more carefully. You know, if you see something wrong, if you're just a spectator, say something, right? Like, you don't want to interrupt the game, but if you're like, I clearly saw something that was against the rules, get a judge over, right? So Pikula is the one who spearheaded the, because it went from cheating is cool to cheating's not cool to like, oh, maybe angle shooting's cool to no, it's not cool. Where nowadays it's like nothing's cool. Like, just be the best player and that's it. Like, you know, keep the game as pure as possible, you know, like, so yeah.
Did I think that we deserved it at the time? Like I told you, I was pretty naive. I would literally argue straight to a Worth Wolpert or a David Price or a Chris Pikula that they're full of shit and they're making up stories about our team. You know, why are you gonna besmirch us? Why can't you just hate? You know, you're not as good as us. You want to be us. You know, I was like the little bulldog, just talking shit to those guys all the time, and telling them they're full of crap and making up stories about our team and stuff like that. And I look back afterwards like, oh, probably some shady shit.
Look, so let's say you had a bloom on your lap or on your chair because you're perched in such a way that you don't even have a lap. And let's say the judges are coming over and like they suspect it. You shove it onto the ground, right? If it winds up on the ground, that doesn't mean that it was on the ground. Like, if he's actually cheating, which I don't know, I guess I think is likely, but I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I don't know for sure. It's, of course you would shove it onto the ground like it just fell out of your deck, like, rather than have it in the easily accessible chair portion. Like, I heard both versions. I didn't see it, so all my information is hearsay. I don't actually know anything. But yeah, my impression is, was it on his lap? Was it on his chair? Was it on the ground? I think it wound up on the ground by the time the judges found it, which gave him some tiny shred of, I guess, enough plausible deniability to get away with it.
Squandered resource is really the engine of the deck, and you know, this will actually wind up having significant added importance in this documentary because of the controversy surrounding Cadaverous Bloom. As if I would choose Cadaverous Bloom of all cards to have be hidden away. If I was going to hide a card or have a card that was an ace in the hole, it would certainly be squandered resources.
Yeah, I think that's fundamentally what most of the people that tried to be kind of generous in their interpretation of the event couldn't get past. It's the idea that you can make small little procedural errors, but there's no way that a card that is an integral part of a combo deck, one of its key pieces, winds up outside of your deck once the game has begun. There's no way that you start the game without knowing that your deck is missing a card. It's too important. Honestly, it's just too ingrained. Anybody playing at that level has a certain sequence of things that they do at the start of every game, because we've shuffled up and pile shuffled and shuffled the decks and counted them thousands and thousands and thousands of times. It's so algorithmic that if there's any deviation from that, alarm bells are going to instantly go off. You get so familiar with how 60 cards feel that you can literally pick your deck up and you can just tell that it's missing a card or that it has an extra card in it. And so I don't understand how the card gets into Long's lap if he doesn't put it there intentionally. How does that happen? The truth is that so frenetic in all of his movements. And I'm sure you've seen video where he's perched up on the back of the chair. He would sit in a way that he could actually lean forward, and people had a bad habit of exposing their hand by tilting it forward. And so he would sit high in his chair and he could see the top of people's cards. You only need one glimpse. And now you've got free glasses of Urza effect. You get one little glimpse of information, and now you have this massive advantage in the game. And no one's telling him to sit down. Of course, the only mollifying factor is the fact that he was playing for no stakes other than ego. It doesn't matter. At a certain point, the person's ego is so invested in the outcome, their identity is so invested in the outcome of being the man, that's the only incentive. They don't need a prize. It just needs to be that. And in the case of Mike Long, it's like, you're the man. You're 20-0 now. Why not be 21-0? Wouldn't that be cool? Undefeated through U.S. Nationals. That's some serious bragging rights. That could be enough to make someone want to cheat even when they didn't need to. And so you don't need to like actually have a monetary incentive or anything. So if I had to sort of like bang a gavel in this situation, I would say the odds favor that he did something untoward.
And then the last round of the Swiss, I was beating down on Bryce Kearns, which by the way was going to knock him out of the tournament, but I was going to knock him out. I think I was up 1-0 and shuffling, and then somebody from the crowd pointed out that one of my cards was on the floor, and it was face down, so I couldn't see what it was at the time. So I reached down to pick it up, and it was a cadaverous bloom. So I picked it up and put it back in my deck, and I kind of looked around to see what was going to happen because I'm Mike Long, and you got to see if anything's going to happen. It was innocent enough mistake. Pete was actually playing to make top 8, and I was mostly watching his game at the time. My game wasn't of much consequence, so it must have been while I was distracting watching him that the card dropped from my deck all the way to the floor where it was underneath my chair on the floor. So obviously I didn't take it from my lap and put it on the floor. It was on the floor. That's where it was. That's where everybody saw it. The whole idea of the bloom being in my lap was completely invented by Chris Pikula, who used that Ivy League brain advantage instead of for magic. He used that Ivy League brain advantage to come up with a very clever lie about where the bloom was. Anybody can do it. And what's the strategic advantage of a cadaverous bloom sitting face down on a chair underneath me with 25 people watching, 50 people, 100 people watching?
I didn't do fucking shit. I didn't fucking do this.
I watched Mike's tournament like most of the games. Wanted to see how some of the top players who had been there before played and how they were getting it done. I thought Mike's techniques for cheating that day were not on point. Like, I certainly respect Mike Long as a cheater. I cheated plenty of times myself. Okay, first of all, his legs are like up, right? Like they're kind of even with his waist. So his hands, his knees are above the table. So if he's shuffling at knee level, his knees are a horizontal disguise, like blinder for the crowd, for a camera, or for anything else. Probably aren't going to catch it like him sliding a card off the bottom of the deck when your hands are like molded on it. You know, like if I'm shuffling and I slip out like that onto my lap, you know, nobody's going to see that if I do it right. And then like I said, I can crouch and hide it. There's ways to disguise it in there. And then during the match, at any point, dude, like when I need that fucker and it's time to blow, right out of the lap. Right out of the lap, dude. I could easily pull that out of my lap and no one would ever see the difference. All I have to do is say, "Can I see your graveyard?" That's all I would have to do is say, "Can I see your graveyard?" Lean in, throw a hand out, keep this hand in, let me see your graveyard, pull it out of your lap.
And I stood up and I go, "What's in your graveyard over there, man?" And I go, I grab his graveyard, and there are literally 15 people watching this match. It was like the finals for the top 8 or something. And by me, like, just boisterously jumping up and grabbing his graveyard, my friend was able to take 5 lands out of my graveyard and put them on the top of my library while I'm looking through, and I'm like finding cards, and I'm like, "What is this? You're playing with this card?" Like, just talking absolute nonsense just to distract everybody. And I'm like, "Man, I'm not gonna lose to this deck. Whatever. I'm throwing glaciers. Go, man."
I mean, that's how I would do it. And I cheated a lot. So, I mean, I'm just saying. I would definitely do something like that if I was trying to win 50K. He will probably claim for the rest of his life that he didn't cheat, that he didn't know, that somehow Cadaverous Bloom. This guy's a technical specialist, okay? There's no fucking way I ever believe in my entire life that he didn't know where all his cards were at all times. You can't tell me somebody who's that meticulous doesn't know where their shit is. They know exactly where it is. They know where your shit is. They know where the next guy's shit is. They know where this guy's eyes are. They know where that judge's eyes are. And they know when to interrupt the right moment at the right time to get everybody smack dab surprised. What happened? I don't know. You got to create the moment, and he's really good at it.
The part that's going to not come across in your video, no matter how you put it, and this is something I've dealt with my entire career, no one believes that shit. Everyone thinks that, how could I know Mike Long and not know these things, right? But I'm telling you, like, the dude's charismatic. The reason I was on the team is because playing against, I believe in iron sharpens iron. So if I'm playing against better players, I'm going to get better.
Let's understand what's going on. If the card was ever in his chair, where from his perch he can lead down, like, this is constructive possession. He could add that to his hand at any moment in time. That's a major violation. So that's my final take on it. And then, yeah, obviously the big thing that's crazy was that, if it was an attempted okey doke, it was a weird thing to do at 11-0, that's for sure.
Well, let me tell you, around here, if you got caught with a card in your lap at the poker table, it certainly wouldn't matter to anybody how it got there, and you would not make it to the next round.
But they didn't kick him out. They treated the whole situation as if it was just a big accident. So then we move on to the top 8. And now the only hope for the good guys is to beat him.
I played John Finkel in round 1 of the top 8. And it ends up being pretty one-sided. Not surprisingly, as John Finkel is clearly one of the best to ever play the game. One of the biggest talents. It's not surprising that he ended up beating me. He had, by that point, just either playing me that one time, probably getting a little bit more information from other people about the deck, learned very, very quickly how to optimally play against my deck. And John Finkel against me, everyone's going to put money on Finkel no matter what. I'm okay with that. He's got Meek Stones for Mike Scragnoth for sideboard. He knows what spells to look out for. He's not just going to basically sacrifice a Traywin Rioter to a Desert Twister anymore. He knows that he can probably take his time and kind of slowly bleed me out with his card advantage, his ability to stop the important spells that my deck really wants to get out, or to really my ability to stop what his game plan is. He plays around it pretty well, and I kind of don't have a chance. I'm pretty sure I lost 2-0.
My first match was with the mono red, and unfortunately my mono red deck was built to beat decks that were not mono red. The Mog Flunkies were the biggest mulligan ever. If you watch, actually that match got a significant amount of replay in the Road to Worlds video. There's some video of, probably me having Mog Flunkies in play and him having 3 Curse Scrolls in play or something. And, so that was a lot. And also in the sideboard, so like I should have had Bottle Gnomes. Like I built the sideboard literally 10 minutes before the tournament. This shows you my lack of professionality. And I, put Mog Maniac in. I have no idea why. So, you get what you pay for.
First round I played Pete Lyer. He was on Frostbloom. He was a Virginia guy, good friends with Mike. So no surprise they're on the same deck. The match did not seem particularly hard. Like I don't know. Like I feel like he got kind of bad draws. I also had cards for Disenchant's main, an Aura Silence main, another in the board, Soltari Visionary, Abeyance. Like I had cards that, like, as long as I could get if I could get 3 points of pressure down by turn 2, like just go 1 drop into a 2 drop, and then just kind of disrupt their shit. Like that's like was my game plan against them.
For nationals, the top 8 used a modified double elimination structure to determine the top 4 that would go on to represent the United States at the World Championships.
You think you could cheat John Finkel? So, I just played him straight up. I thought the matchup was really strongly to my advantage.
I feel like Bloom was one of those matchups that, I could win, but I feel like I was a bit of an underdog. Overall, I think it was a matchup where sideboarding probably helped them more than me. And I'm guessing that the top 8 was probably best of 5. I mean, I don't know if it was 4-game sideboard or 3. I remember when they changed it. If it was 4-game sideboard, that's obviously worse. So I mean, there's those matches you go into it, you're like, I'm a small underdog, but somewhere in that 40 to 50% range probably.
So, I figured I was a pretty nightmare matchup, him being, more trade with wire rider oriented. That's the way that he was, dealing with threats and stuff like that. His deck was so functionally slow. And then, did I have anything in the sideboard for him? And I would have like City of Solitude and stuff like that in the sideboard he don't want to see.
And then round 2, I played against the great Dave Price, who was on mono red like Sly. I had randomly I think I had 2 Spirit Links in my sideboard.
I know that we put Spirit Links in for mono red because we had protection from red creatures, and then you could Imperial Armor it and just that kind of thing. Like I actually did think of that. It's not something that just like they acted like, oh, how did this happen? It's we did actually plan for that.
So one game I just went, he had a good draw, and I just went Priest Armor into Spirit Link, and they literally can't race it, like even with Ball Lightning. So that matchup was kind of a joke. I don't think I lost a game in that matchup.
With the mono red deck that we built, had a very high win percentage against Frost Bloom players that were not willing to go all in as soon as possible with the risk of fizzling. And so I think that was kind of foreign at the time. Like, I also think that people underestimated the amount of damage a red deck could do if you give them one extra turn. And so I easily 3-0'd Peter Lyer. He was very conservative with his trying to go off, and that's just, I mean, it's just it's just kind of one of those things. But that and maybe he just had bad draws too. But I was just saying, my general feeling was like, if I was this guy, like they're tanking on turn 4 or something, and I'm just like, I hope he doesn't go for it. You know what I mean? And so like they're like, go, and I'm like, okay, cool, you're dead, boom. You know what I mean? So like I just felt like I had that feeling a lot, that they just weren't trying to. They were like, I know if I wait one more turn, the game's over, but the game was over before they could untap.
Next round, I play against Ryan, who's playing basically a carbon copy of my deck. It's probably just going to come down to who can come up with a better draw, who can, with limited ability to interact with like the really important cards that your opponent has. It really comes down to kind of who draws more Desert Twisters, realistically. Like the one spell that this can kill anything, no matter what. Your deck can't stop it. I'm casting this Twister, nothing's going to die. So it kind of comes down to who draws that spell more often. I don't really remember much beyond that. The decks have the ability to scale up creatures pretty tall with moving spikes around, bouncing them, just ad nauseum replaying them. Decks had lots and lots of artifact control with Octavia Orangutan. I think Creeping Mold was one of them, and Desert Twister, obviously. So now you're basically supporting 12 ways to kill artifacts. So Curse Scrolls aren't going to be long for the world. You can maybe get one hit off of it. That's about it. So last round I'm playing against David Price. I don't remember the eventual match score, but I do remember the final game that we played. And I remember they weren't broadcasting our match from the start. And I remember the cameras getting set up, and basically as soon as the feed went live, you heard this big "oh" from the audience, because the camera's looking down at the field of play. and I probably have 10 cards in play, and Dave Price has maybe 1 or 2.
You know, I remember I played long in the semis and lost. At that point, it was like a 3-person U.S. national team. So I played Andrew Pacifico. It was a pretty close matchup. I felt like I was a little bit advantaged, but I kind of thought part of that was I was a little more familiar with playing it and maybe a little better. My deck was a little bit odd. You know, I kind of suspect if I played myself 100 times, the version playing me playing red would probably win like 60 of them.
And in the finals, I'm playing against John Finkel. Definitely not the first place you want to play against Finkel. So the things I remember, I put some slops in the tournament reports. So at this time, it was pretty interesting. We were not allowed to play with sleeves on camera because of the lighting. You know, they would shine. It messed with the cameras. They couldn't figure out the angles these days. So we had to take our cards out of sleeves. And I mean, the rules and the oversight was lacking in a sense that like my lands were all arena lands from like this there was a set, it was like a special set of arena. I was not comfortable with the, you know, the shuffling and stuff, and I wasn't, you know, I'm not, I just remember like being, you know, concerned about having to riffle shuffle my lands. This is just back in the time where your cards are all in different conditions and stuff. You know what I mean? Like I got stuff that's heavily played, and like all my arena lands are probably mint condition, and I'm just like, this sucks. So this is just, you know, thoughts that are going through my head as I'm like shuffling my deck. So I'm like shuffling, and Finkel is like staring at me, my shuffling. But and I'm, you know, this is just my interpretation of it. But I felt like he was like staring at it to, you know, and he's the legend. It is what it is, but he gave me the impression that he was trying to look for a favorable cut. Like, and I remember I was like shuffling off to the side. I called the judge to ask if he could stop watching me shuffle. Like, I'm like, man, I was like, can you just get him to stop watching me shuffle? Like, I'm gonna shuffle. It's gonna be okay. And so I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Pacifico, I mean, he's one of those guys that, we're like, yeah, like this guy, you know. I mean, he wasn't like, I don't think he was Mike Long level, I don't really know, but he was, definitely, known to be a cheater.
So yeah, the match gets off. That's just interesting stuff that, you know, it's different today from yesterday. Like we could play in sleeves, we don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. So the games come off, and I just remember just coming out pretty clean. Game in the first 3 games, I was up 2-1. My girlfriend was in the stands back there. But like back in the day, there was like, you know, it was like invite only. They had bleachers where people were able to watch and stuff. And so I was like fist pumping my girl. And then I just got Finkeled. You know what I'm saying? What are you gonna do? You know, just I think that I remember either being told that if I would have went all in with like a ball lightning at one point in time, that I was trying to build up for a counter, like have multiple things, the game was over. That is to say how great of a player he is. Like I mean, my ability to read people is so strong, and he showed no fear. You know what I mean? And it did get me to delay and all in for the purpose of, you know, he's a great player. You know what I mean?
So now the world's team has been decided. It's down to the finals. High noon. Matt Linde, a teenager in his first big event, finds himself squared off against Magic's most notorious bad boy, Michael Law. To top it all off, Mike won 2 out of the first 3 games of the final match, so Matt would need to win 2 games in a row to bring him down. Game 4 is the stuff of legends. Almost everybody's rooting for Matt Linde to take it down.
I wanted Linde to win. I mean, I was friends with Matt, you know. It was like, the young Jedi, joked about, good versus evil. Of course, I was on the side of light.
I'd have been rooting for Mike. 100%. 100%. Keep the Marylander kids in place. And I'd be rooting for Michael to beat Linde. Beat the hell out of Linde.
Which will get him another planes into play. They don't cast another creature. But I don't think this is going to be fast enough. Long's hand is unbelievable.
Yeah, does Long have the entire combo in his hand already? Is he missing Cadaver's Bloom?
He has a natural balance, a Vampiric Tutor, a Squandered Resources.
Vampiric Tutor. Yep. You'll never guess what I'm gonna get.
Gloom? Is he gonna tutor for Gloom, Chris?
I don't know. He might just get Cadaverous Bloom. No, he gets Gloom.
You get some good Gloom.
So Gloom here may just seal the fate. He already has an Emerald Charm, which would kill the Aura of Silence anyway.
Yeah, Gloom will keep armor off of his back and buy him at least 3 more turns under the shadows.
What's your card? Wait, I think this is the card. Okay. Yeah, that is. Can I borrow the pen?
What? That's harassment. That's harassment.
Okay.
So this is very much looking like Mike Long is going to be U.S. national champion.
So good. God.
Gloom.
So there's Gloom.
He's done.
All right, Linde needs some planes fast.
Matt Linde is someone in a position of just happy to be here, so you can tell he's not very upset at losing, but
There's 1 planes.
Soul Warden could come out, but I just hit you before.
Sorry. What am I at?
Yeah. Done.
Does he have everything in his hand right now?
He does not have a Cadaverous Bloom.
And he has Meditate and Contract?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He doesn't have blue mana right now either. Though he has Natural Balance.
He has a natural balance.
Okay, Life Tales are what? Long at 10? Linde
Long
at 20?
is not low enough. Then he can't cast anything in his hand. Long's at 8.
Green mana.
Green.
Yeah, I think Long is not happy about his 4 forests, though.
Almost good.
There's Abeyance. Bash.
That's every forest in Mike Long's deck. Maybe he'll sack him and forget he doesn't need a green to cast Bloom. Which I did at Regionals.
Wow. Very impressive.
Oh.
Well, you know what may happen here? He may have to cast Natural Balance and he may get Abeyance by Linde before he can even do anything. Draw an island.
Yeah.
Or a Bloom.
Is that a gemstone run?
No, it's an Emerald Charm.
Emerald Charm.
Okay, he has to balance, which means he's going to get Abayanced in response to as soon as the balance of all.
That is unreal.
He wins. Linde will win this game.
That is absolutely unbelievable. I cannot believe that Linde
is going to win.
He's going to win this game. Unreal. He has an Abeyance in his hand. Are you 100% certain?
100% sure.
Please do not
right
get my hopes up.
The right side of his hand is an Abeyance.
Unbelievable. A game that looked so over that the crowd thought the game was over. We thought the game was over. Mike Long thought the game was over. I think Mike Long needs to borrow the pen again.
Some bad. Write it all over his forest.
Did Mike Long leave green in his pool?
I'm not letting that.
Okay, so all he has to do is Abeyance him in response to the first spell that he casts.
Yeah, it's Abeyance in response to anything.
Which is probably Meditate. He better do it though. That's the question. He still has to do it.
I think he knows. If he doesn't Abeyance him, I will personally crush him.
Jason Gordon did not counterspell. Wait, there it is. He says
Here it
stop.
comes.
Here it comes.
Here it comes.
Better.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Good game.
And we're going to game 5.
And then, the commentary was done by Pikula and Brian Hacker. And then when they thought I was going to lose, Pikula, I remember, was like, oh, Mike Long's going to, like, because they don't have a good history. So, I mean, I only know this watching the pack, but, when they thought I was going to lose, he was, like, actively upset. I remember from the video, And then like when he kept drawing forests that had a natural balance for other lands, I got the natural balance up to 5, so that my Bane was turned on through a Gloom, which was the game sealer. And then as soon as it ended, it was just an eruption, and then my head's going. I was just like, it was like the closest I'm gonna come, to a professional athlete scoring like a touchdown in NFL or whatever, hitting a game winner in the NBA or like whatever analogy you want to make. But it was fantastic hearing the energy from the crowd.
I've never heard a louder crowd reaction, and I've been in the booth for like 100 Pro Tour level events, right? I've been in the crowd, I've been in the booth, I've been watching. I've never heard it louder than that. And the part that sticks with me is, so we're in this one room in the Origins Convention Hall. They're actually playing. They're like way down the hall. They're like, 3 ballrooms down the hall. They're totally sequestered, right? Except the crowd is long enough that Mike hears the roar. And like, you see Mike look over his shoulder toward the hallway at one point. That's the roar. He heard it. He's not supposed to be able to hear anything from the crowd. That's how loud it was. And just like the dawning realization in his eyes is just, that's the memory I keep from this thing, is that roar and that look from Mike, almost panicked. That was just a hell of a moment.
And it's actually, because it's a problem where, they'd have you away, but you're like, I can like hear, it's like, can they see our hands? Like, I don't want them to be able to see my hand, because I don't want them to, cheer or not cheer if they see the card I drew. Or, there was a draft top 8 where I can hear the commentators discussing my deck, because the it's being played out over, and I'm like, guys, like they're about to start talking about my deck. I can hear it. Or maybe I heard someone else's deck. I was like, talk about someone else's deck, like I don't want to be here about any decks over here, So I there was something nice about that, about having sort of more of a crowd that was a little bit more watching you, a little more engaged, sort of a bit in like a pre-screen universe, so to speak.
A specific roar that like I remember him wondering was when Matt draws the abeyance. Like it's actually bad. Like it's the crowd leaking information. It's actually really bad for Matt that like we have essentially told Mike something really bad for you happened when Matt drew a card off the top of his deck. I think I have this right, that it's when he drew the abeyance. Like Mike figuring out what's going on, like the game winning play is obviously getting the planes so that it can cast the abeyance. And everyone's like, oh, is Matt going to see it? Is Matt going to figure it out? But yet him just actually drawing that abeyance that could break up the combo was actually the moment where the crowd knew that was what he needed, and that was how he was going to win this game. To the point where they actually leaked a little bit of information. Sure, I feel bad from a competitive integrity point of view, but just the moment was amazing.
Wow, partner! Now this is one heck of a story.
It didn't necessarily have to be me, but I think the way it was scripted was perfect, where it's like, you obviously have this villain, right? Like, and Mike was the first villain of Magic. Like, I mean, that he was, and to be honest, I think he wanted that. Like, I think that was intentional on his part. And that's why Rosewater like wanted him in the Hall of Fame, because he was the first actual like kind of like character in Magic. He was like, he knew he was a nemesis, and he embraced it, right? Just like any Darth Vader, whatever movie villain you want to compare him to, he embraced that. Like, I know that everyone's against me, and like he wanted that, right? So then you have this like 16-year-old first big tournament, innocent kid, like could obviously tell from the video that was nervous as can be, like even though I know Mike like from local play before that, like obviously this a huge stage for me. So it was just like this like good versus evil sort of like biblical. I mean, that's why Chris was in the commentary was so like vocal about it. Like his disdain for Mike came across even when he was commentating.
When I rewatched it, I was kind of surprised at how my anti-Mike bias only comes out a few times, really. There's other tournaments where I think it's much stronger, where I've done much more biased commentary than that.
He
doesn't have another
He doesn't
land.
have another land, so he can't draw a scorn of resources and a land in the next draw phase.
Well, all right. All right, I guess he can.
So yeah, the time where I think Brian says, I think to win, Mike would have to draw squandered resources and a land, maybe is what he says, and he can't do that. And I say, oh, well, or something like that, implying that maybe he can. And Brian and I both know that what I'm implying is that he could just draw an extra card. Yeah, I don't remember if they asked us to not say things like that, or if we just sort of, I don't know. I don't know if we edited or we just felt that it was funnier to not explain the joke. I don't know. Probably.
I think it's Pikula who says it. I think he's, maybe I said it. I don't really remember, but of course it was unscripted and so perfect. Long needs to draw 2 cards right now, right? The only way that he gets out of this situation is drawing 2. And then we both pause and we go, I mean, you can't do that. But it is Mike Long. True.
Whoop.
If Long had 3 Dread Knights this game instead of 3 Glooms, I think he would probably win.
I know what you got by that.
Very possible.
Untap.
Untap.
Upkeep.
Finish one.
Good game. Disenchant the scorn of resources.
Disenchant square.
Kick me in the nuts.
Oh, what's about it? Oh, and there's the handshake we've all been waiting for.
Matt Linde is national
Matt
champion.
Linde is national champion.
After I won, you know, and like it was over, I just hear this like eruption, and like I know they weren't in the next room, but it was still very, very loud. Like I could like hear it, and it was like the coolest feeling. Like, you know,
Dang, I love it when the good guys win.
I remember thinking at the end of it, like I just was really happy that, because a lot of times the good guys don't get to win, and Lindy's a good dude, and Mike isn't, and so, or at least wasn't. I won't make a comment in 2025, but you know, prior conversation notwithstanding. But at the time, we were all really happy for Matt. We were also really happy that it happened to be against Mike. I won't lie. So,
you know, the way it shook out, you know, obviously I'm glad how it happened. You know, Mike probably wasn't, but
I was pretty happy.
It was a good story. I remember someone, I don't remember the other's name, but someone wrote an article, and it probably was like Scry back then, or some magic publication that kind of wrote an article to this effect that it was like an unknown versus like the biggest, you know, evil in our game, or you know, whatever the title was. And
I really felt like I'd won. I was really happy with the result. I was really happy for Matt. We were splitting money evenly, so it was the same amount of money either way. And I was just really proud of him. You know, it was a huge breakthrough. I was a big fan of his Merfolk Cursed Troll deck.
The Merfolk's here. He's second in command.
I thought he was bright. He'd had some other decks I'd spotted him playing here and there that I always thought was good. When I played him in the Swiss, like what I mean is we'd run it, like we were always at the same tournaments, and you know, obviously the connection with Kyle, you know, that's why he had the deck. And we continue to be, you know, teammates, and it was great. He was a great teammate at Worlds. Really proud of him. He and Bryce did a really solid job, each of them. It was a hard tournament for both of them, but they both did great. And we captured our my third world championship, which I was really, really proud of. It's really not as bad as you think. I mean, it was like, who the hell doesn't want to see this, you know, the protege beat the masters? I mean, who doesn't want to see that? Like, do you think that part of me wasn't rooting for him to beat me? You know, and we went on and we went to Worlds, and we were a successful team at Worlds. We won a world championship together. That to me, those are my biggest Super Bowl rings. I've been a Pro Tour champion. That was great. I've been an invitational champion, beating all the other top players. That was great. It was really, really great. They were both great. Got my own card, but my favorites are my world championships.
So there you have it. The good guy beat the bad guy, just like everybody wanted to happen. But to me, that's not the main story here. You see, you had this bad guy and everybody knew he was the bad guy. Why did he get invited to the tournament to begin with? And once he got caught, why did he get to make it all the way to the finals? Well, I'll tell you, the answer is that there's another bad guy, an even bigger bad guy, that's in charge of it all.
I can see Wizards deserves to be made at least part of the villain in this whole thing, because they definitely created an environment that they let people run wild in, right?
You know, I was making a Magic documentary 15 years ago myself. It was called I Came to Game.
People connect to people. Like, people want to root for or against people. And so what we wanted to do was, well, who are the people in the game that both are good and also charismatic? I mean, and when I say charismatic, I mean you want to watch them. Mike Long, very charismatic. Now, given most people were rooting against him, but he drew crowds like nobody's business. They loved to root against him. And so my job was to figure out and find the people, because pretty much the point of the feature matches was building up celebrities, and then the finals was picking which matches to show. And so I felt like my job was sort of building celebrities. And in order to do that, I was big on, really taking some aspect of them and pushing that aspect. And that, people really wanted to have, the guy that's the best in the game, and people wanted to have the villain, and people wanted to have these different things. And so we created them. I mean, they were there. I'm not saying that Mike Long doesn't have the qualities that he has, or that Mark Justice didn't have the qualities that he had, but we definitely played them up. That people wanted to see Mike Long as a villain, fine, we played that up. And we've talked before, like one of the things that saddens me, the fact that Mike isn't in the Hall of Fame is we actively played him up as a bad guy because it made sense for the Pro Tour, and that there's plenty of other people, some of which are even in the Hall of Fame, that we could have made choices with them. There were seeds in some other players that if we wanted to make them the bad guy, we could have, but we didn't. We made Mike the bad guy because, to be honest, he was a great bad guy.
Rosewater admitted it in his article, the long story article. He says, look, it was good for business to have Mike Long as a bit of a villain. It was something that they exaggerated, something that they created. And also some of the things he said, I kind of have to say to Mark, I reread his article today. You kiss your daughter with that mouth. I mean, saying that I have a lack of integrity. Sorry, Red. Like, I don't know. I have incredible track record of success, incredible transparency on what I've done and what I do today.
I don't know which event it was. It was some event I think I didn't attend, actually. But Mike Long made it to the top 8 again. And Mike Long plays in the quarterfinals, and it's a packed house of people on site to sit in the crowd with the little earpieces watching the commentary and watching Mike Long play. And Mike Long wins his quarterfinal match. And they go to the semifinals, and Mike Long's match rolls around, and it's a packed house while he plays. And he loses in the semis. And when the finals roll around, crickets. There's no one there to watch it. No one even cares anymore. That is Mike Long's legacy, and it's a really important part of the role that he played in Magic's formative years. Honestly, Mike Long made the people who played against him better. He was a memorable opponent in many ways. He and I locked horns. We clashed. I think we played at least 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, I mean, I get the case for the pro wrestling, make it an entertainment event, but that isn't what I wanted competitive Magic to be, right? That isn't what I wanted to participate in. It sucked for the competitors who were sort of forced to try to police it. So it ultimately isn't what I wanted Magic to be. And no, I did not vote for Mike. I could understand the case. I didn't agree with it.
It's like, have some respect for the game. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we need a villain there. It's like, no, it's like, have some respect for the people who are playing, the people who are cheated out of opportunities by Mike. Yeah. I mean, look, I love Mark. You know what I mean? He's a good job. But I think this is, look, Mark is never shy about sharing opinions, and he even appreciates it when they're controversial. But I think that that this goes down as one of his poorer opinions in his lifetime.
Good parts of being around Mike Long was that I got to be a much better Magic player. I was always on top of big decks. I was working with guys like Brian Schneider to build decks, David Mills to build decks. I was drafting with harder draft practices than you'd get in the Pro Tour, those types of things. And the bad part was, I whatever those clowns got associated with, I got associated with.
I was the guy who, more than anybody, made Magic exciting, interesting, and really did extras to make the game fun and captivating and exciting.
You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
I think what people know of Mike is kind of what we sold of him. You know what I'm saying? That it's really weird for me in that there are other players and other people that did things, but we really didn't play that up. Behind the scenes, like one of my jobs, because I was sort of the conduit with the players, is if somebody did something that's a little shady, let's say, but they'd never done anything before, my job was to sort of pull them aside and go, hey, something happened. We're going to assume this is just coincidence, but we're watching you. If this happens again, that would be bad. I'm sure it's an accident this time, just coincidence, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You do that again, we're paying attention. And I gave that speech to a lot of players. I won't name names, but a lot of players might surprise people who, I had to sit down and give them the speech. And I feel like Mike is the person who we made public, who it was public we gave him the speech, and we really played that up.
Mark always tried to claim, Mark kind of wanted Mike to be a villain without cheating. You know what I mean? He just thought that was always part of the big disagreement, where Mark was like, there has to be villains, and we were like, this is not about him being a jerk. This isn't about he's, he trash talks, or he's or cocky, or this isn't about some he is those things, but they wanted to paint it as some sort of other rivalry, and we were all just like, no, the guy is cheating. This is not a clash of personalities. He is stealing from us. So I'm not surprised they didn't say anything. And why would you if you're trying to promote it? But that was our argument. That's why you don't want him in the game. So you don't feel like you have to promote a cheater, and you definitely don't want to talk about the cheating. But
I was fine being on the bad guy team, and because I felt it was a competition. I felt it was it was us against them, it was us against the world, right? How are we going to show we're the best?
By the time I got to the Pro Tour in season 3, there wasn't quite as much cheating as sort of what I'd heard about from the first 2 seasons. I think that Chris Pikula and Team Dead Guy in particular had just done this amazing public service of pointing things out and telling you how to guard against things and, calling out the cheaters. And so peer pressure was starting to build that did eventually sort of, I don't know if the peer pressure drove the cheaters out of the game or if the peer pressure on Wizards forced Wizards to actually sort of crack down. So by the time you get into the 2000s, Wizards is actually cracking down. And this story in 1998 sort of, I feel like it's a bit of a transition. At some level, I couldn't have won as much as I won if the cheaters were actually running rampant, because I wasn't cheating. I certainly was doing my best to watch out for stuff, but it's not like I caught a bunch of stuff either. So I think it was starting to get better, but it hadn't yet. And it was starting to get better, but also the pressure was starting to get, more notorious. People were being pointed out as who you specifically needed to watch out for. So it was kind of on the players at this point. Eventually it became on WotC, and I think Wizards eventually came to value having a sort of fair environment for their competition more than having an entertainment product.
Frankly, the hardest part about this whole thing is that he was literally the most talented and best player I ever played against. There's no denying it. He's absolute. His mind for the game, his ability to read situation, his resource management skills, out of this chart, out of the world, off the charts is what I'm trying to say.
I will say, I think if Mike had never cheated, he was good enough at Magic that he could have wound up in the Pro Tour Hall of Fame. The man was very good. He understood decks, he understood matchups, he understood the game at a level that, I think there was a point where he was the best player in the world. I don't know how, it's hard to know how much of that is because of edges he was getting that were outside the rules. But like based on my interaction with him and like how sharp he was in his understanding of the game, like I don't think he had to do all of that to win.
I mean, Mike was a good Magic player, right? I mean, without the other stuff, I'm saying, the man understood Magic. He was a good Magic player, Now, he also did things like having cards in his lap, and was definitely one of the sketchier figures, rightfully so, in Magic history.
In terms of, transcendent superstars that really lit up the brand, I got treated crazy bad.
The man took a Lamborghini to Coachella. You saw that, right? Like, he's an enigma. He's an absolute enigma.
Long through a crowd, absolutely. Everybody wanted to watch him lose. There's no question that. But I definitely think you can question whether Wizards was right to set up an environment where there were cheaters running around that the players had to kind of watch out for. However, if their goal was, how can we create compelling drama? How can we get people to show up and watch the stream? They were kind of right. It worked. People wanted to watch Mike, and I've never in my life seen a crowd more into a match than the Long Wendy final.
I'm glad I could save the day, I guess, so to speak. I don't know, whatever.
Sorry, not sorry.
And he put Chill Out like on a sideboard game, and I looked at it real quick, and then I just went right back into the flow like it never happened. Like I just played cards as if it wasn't even on the table, and I was just throwing stuff out. A judge walks by and goes, "You can't do that. Chill's on the board." And I looked up at him and like, okay. And then I just kept going. I didn't even pick anything up.
Or I stone rained, and then I just picked it up out of my graveyard and I stone rained, and they just never checked the graveyard or whatever, at any moment. And this is the worst. This is the one where it's like if they like, wait, let me see your graveyard. You're just like, I can see. You're gonna have to like grab everything and run out the door or something.
Hold on, let me redo that one because I feel like I just didn't know how to end it.
I bet that's an awesome clip.
David Mills. David and I, in the 1 year that we played Pro Magic together, we were ranked number 1 and number 2 in the world. David's happily married. David Mills. The David Mills one punch win method. David and I, David Mills, and David said, you just can't live like this. David Mills. David and I, David Mills. John Slaughter is the one who introduced me to David Mills. So it's basically one of the most important people who's ever lived. David Mills. What David would do, David would insist. David Mills. But I do not like German food. David didn't like German food. It was David and I. That was up to David. David Mills. David Mills and I. David Mills. David Mills and I invented over-the-shoulder videos. David Mills fought his way into the back room and got the judge ejected. It was awesome. It's one of the best moments of my life. David Mills. David and I had David Mills. David Mills. Some of the people watching this documentary will use it as a gateway to meeting David Mills, and I am very excited for your future. David Mills is also great at mind game. David Mills and I. David, why should people listen to David Mills? David, just simple as mathematically counting up your cards for a 40-card deck is about the same math that it takes for you to know that God exists, certainly, and know his general nature. And by the way, he's a good guy. And he's unlimited. So it's great.